Hello again, everybody. Marcus here. I review stuff. Today, I'm reviewing the song Barbarism Begins at Home by the Smiths. Smiths fans, here is your weekly Smiths song. So, always a pleasure with this band. I always mention one thing I love about them is the lyricism. So, I'm looking forward to this one. I can tell just by the title it's it's definitely going to be an interesting topic, and I'm probably going to have a lot to say about it. So, without further ado, you guys already know it's the Smiths. So, the Smiths, Barbarism Begins at Home. Let's give it a listen. And here we go. Ooh. Man, that was great. I loved that. And I was so right. I have a lot to say about this song from a lyrical standpoint, including probably a pretty long story from my teaching experience. But lyrically, this song it fits in line with a lot of what the Smiths talk about. So fantastic. I apologize if it seemed like I was spacing out during the video, because I kind of was. I was just enjoying the groove. That bass was so funky. I loved it. The guitar work was amazing. The drumming provided some nice energy. But Morrissey sounds great as always. But for me, I was just lost in thought, because again, this really conjures up a memory of a student I've taught before. And the Smiths, they hit the nail on the head with this one lyrically. So I think, what I'll do is usually I talk about the lyrics first, but because it's probably going to be a long conversation with this one, I think I'll save it for the end. So let me start with the instrumentation. As I mentioned, just a groovy bass line there was fantastic. The guitar work was excellent. Take away the subject matter, take away the singing and everything else. If you just give me that groove, man, I would listen to the song again and again and again, just on the strength of the instrumentation alone. Damn, that bass was so groovy. That guitar work was so catchy. I think I was just reading that Marr and what was his name, Andy Rourke, were in a funk band before this, and you definitely see it come through here. The funkiness of this one was fantastic. To me, probably the most just catchy, movable Smith song that I've heard so far. Not saying something, they got some pretty catchy songs, but this one takes the cake for me. Again, great drum work, really provided a nice energy to the song as well. Morrissey sounds great. I give it 2 thumbs up, from an instrumental and vocal standpoint. As far as replay value goes, it's on the playlist. No issue there. This was a fun listen. Again, notwithstanding the lyricism, it's pretty dark and heavy. Just taking it as it's, everything. The lyricism is great. I do love songs that have a lot to say from a lyrical standpoint. So for me, this still really worked. It worked on all avenues. So 2 thumbs up for replay value. So now on to the lyrics. I think I'll read the lyrics first and kind of talk about that. And as I talk about it, I will weave my story in there, I guess. Essentially, for those who don't know, I'm a teacher. I teach 5th grade. I won't tell you where or when, because I don't want to anyone to be able to track or know who this person is. Although if you know me, if you're friends with me personally, and I tell you my stories, you can probably eventually pinpoint it. But there was this kid I taught a few years ago, and he is the spitting image of what this song is about, how barbarism begins at home. So we'll talk about the lyrics, and ingenious title, by the way. So here we go. Unruly boys who will not grow up must be taken in hand. Unruly girls who will not settle down, they must be taken in hand. Essentially saying, from the perspective of maybe an abusive parent, right? That if your children don't do what you want them to, you basically just hit them, right? Is the idea here. A crack on the head is what you get for not asking, and a crack on the head is what you get for asking. And so to me, this is what differentiates a song from something like spanking. There's a lot of controversy around spanking. If I had kids of my own, I don't think I would ever spank them. I don't think I could bring myself to do it. But the research is out. It's spanking, is it good or bad? It's a little bit of both. It kind of depends on how it's used, what the context of it is. I know some people are probably going to argue with me about that, but it's just, spanking works for, I was spanked as a kid, not very often, because I was a pretty good kid for the most part, but I wasn't just beaten for no reason. And I think that's the difference here, is that he says a crack on the head is what you get for not asking, and a crack on the head is what you get for asking. So it's no matter what you do, this person's going to hit you. So it's not used for discipline necessarily. It's not used for to teach a lesson. It's simply abuse at this point, And I think that's the difference that a lot of researchers say about, spanking versus just abuse, is that spanking has to be administered with sort of an end goal, a correction. It's supposed to be a consequence for a negative action. It's not meant to just be used as a fix-all Band-Aid. And in fact, talking is still shown to be the most effective route most of the time. The difference is abuse is just abuse. There is no way to stop or prevent abuse. You can do all the things right, so to speak, and the abuser will still abuse. That's just the truth of it. And so that, to me, this song is not about just corporal punishment necessarily. It's more so about abuse. So, chorus one, unruly boys who will not grow up must be taken in hand. Unruly girls who will not settle down, they must be taken in hand. A crack on the head is what you get for not asking. A crack on the head is what you get for asking. A crack on the head is what you get for not asking. And a crack on the head is what you get for asking. A crack on the head is just what you get. Why? Because of who you are. And again, there it is. It doesn't matter what you do. You are going to be abused just because you are, period. And a crack on the head is what you get. Why? Because of what you are. A crack on the head because of the things you said, the things you did. Unruly boys who will not grow up must be taken in hand. Unruly girls who will not settle down must be taken in hand. And so clearly, again, this is about a parent. Whereas, and I see that the Headmaster Ritual comes off of the same album. Whereas that one is definitely more about abuse in school and that corporal punishment that happened in school. This one is obviously very clearly about that corporal punishment, that abuse that happens at home. And so my story comes in where, again, a few years I taught a kid who, and here's, let me back up just a second again. The reason it's called barbarism begins at home is that, this is a cycle. Research very clearly shows that people who are abused are more likely to eventually grow up to be people who are now abusers. And so, barbarism, that sort of anger, that abuse, it starts at home. That person is abused themselves, and so all they know is to pass it on to the next person. And so I had a student a few years ago who truly embodied that. This kid was messed up, man. I mean, and it's sad. It really was. Basically, both of his parents were junkies. So far as I can tell, piecing all the different stories together, that they probably did drugs while he was in the womb. And yeah, they did not have their lives together at all. There was a point where he was very young. They were basically so high they weren't paying attention to him at all. He fell out of a second-story balcony. I don't know how he was. Obviously he was unsupervised. So, and broke his arm. And he would always tell me that story. I'm like, yeah, I know, dude. You told me before. Yeah, I mean, I was nicer than that. But basically like, oh yeah, it's cool, I guess. Thanks for that story again. But this kid was just very abused. He would come to school wearing the same clothes as he did yesterday and the day before and the day before. He really either didn't know how to wipe or just refused to. So he would come in smelling of shit. Before he got to my class, he used to eat his own shit. Luckily, teachers along the line were able to kind of get him off of that habit. By the time he got to my class, he only ate his own boogers at that point. And he would fart in the middle of the class. He would go to the restroom. He would ask to go to the restroom, and I'd have to remember, hey, buddy, don't forget to wipe, before you come back and wash your hands. And you could tell that he didn't, because he would come, he would leave being fine. He would come back smelling like shit, and you're just like, oh man, this is disgusting. And again, he would just wear the same clothes the next day, so that shit smell would stay with him until the next day. He was messed up. And again, once you meet his parents, you're like, oh, that explains everything. That's all I needed to know. Because again, his parents were super junkies. His dad would just call him fat and make fun of him. And his dad was he's not in the best shape to begin with either. I mean, if anybody was fat, it was his dad. His dad was just very abusive. He would talk about how his son had seen him hit people before, beat people up. I know that he in the past was in a gang, and he had older brothers too who were definitely not raised very well. And so this kid, I remember one day he came to school and he was just having a bad day. He was acting out. You could always tell when something went wrong at home because it translated to how he behaved in school. So anytime he was abused or whatever at home, he would come into school and it would just be a horrible, horrible day. If he didn't get enough sleep, if he stayed up all night because his parents were fighting, if he whatever, right? There was a day I remember very specifically because it almost broke me, as a teacher, especially being a young teacher at the time. He came in and he was just having a super bad day. So me and his basically behavioral teacher came in and we're talking to him and hey buddy, what's up? What's going on? And basically he told us a story about how his older brother pulled a knife on his parents, and they had to call the police and everything. And again, this guy, he was in fifth grade. I teach fifth grade, but he had the emotional maturity of like a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, something like that. So he was telling about how he thought his brother was playing a game, that he was swinging a knife around because he was having fun or whatever. But then he got really scared because he hurt himself. I guess his older brother ended up cutting himself. I don't know if on accident or on purpose or what have you, but. And so then I was like, yeah, why don't you, go to the counselor? Well, you guys will talk about it there. And sure enough, it comes back that, yeah, basically all that did happen. His parents would leave him at the school at 6 a.m. when there was literally nobody there and just drive off, no one to supervise. And this kid was he was a piece of work, man. And he almost broke me, like just from the fact that he was a handful, not to mention all the other kids I had in my class who, needed their education as well. But this kid, eating his boogers, destroying everything in my classroom, he was a terror. And then that's exactly it. The barbarism began at home. He was so used to violence and to uncleanliness and to just shitty conditions that he would bring it to school. He would hit people, he would throw tantrums and cry when he didn't get his way. He would, before he got to my class, there were teachers who he had stabbed with a pencil or thrown furniture at. He threw rocks at his behavioral teacher. He like all kinds of stuff, man. And again, you meet his parents, you hear their story, and it's like, yeah, I get it. It began at home. Everything, and that's the thing. As a teacher, that's exactly how it goes for all of my like bad kids. Essentially, is that you meet them, and you're like, man, why is this kid so bad? Then you meet their parents, and you're like, oh, it explains everything. It really does. Like I had a kid, recently who, again, very just, he was just a mean kid, and a big part of it was that his parents abandoned him. His dad, I think, is in jail. His mom is a druggie. And he lives with his grandparents, and although his grandparents do the best job they can for him, he just, what do you expect from a kid who has never gotten to know his parents, So it's like barbarism truly begins at home. And I can't tell you how many kids I've taught who are raised by their grandparents because, again, parents are in jail or are addicted to drugs or what have you. I taught a kid recently who was a preemie and came out the womb addicted to crack. First of all, being a teacher is hard. It's especially hard when you're empathetic and you hear these stories of, again, barbarism at home. It really truly is just a shame. To just kind of wrap this all up, it also made me lose a lot of faith in our our CPS, Child Protective Services, in our whole system, because the kid I had mentioned earlier with the where he would eat his own shit and blah blah blah. They called CPS on him once a year. As teachers, we are mandatory reporters, so we have to call CPS if we feel abuse is happening. We call CPS every year on this family, and still nothing changes. He still lives with his parents, whatever. So it's like, why? Like, I get the idea of keeping families together if the family is not abusive, but when you have a kid who is so far gone and like so just like, how do you justify that? All this rant to say, the Smiths are hit the nail on the head. Like lyrically, this is very poignant. And it's very true. It begins at home, and there's no reason for it. Again, it's like a crack over the head is what you get because of who you are, because of what you are, because you didn't ask, but because you also did ask. So it's like you can't win, essentially. When you're being abused, it's just abuse. There is no winning. There is no doing the right thing. There is no being perfect or anything like that, right? It's just you are abused because you're there, essentially. So I think lyrically this one's fantastic. Again, the subject matter is very dark. That's not the fantastic part. The fantastic part is just the way that they approach it, the skillfulness of the execution, the skillfulness of the writing, the poignancy of the topic being discussed. This one really hit home for me. Again, just being a teacher and seeing these kids come through our system. And I'll say the school system gets a lot of flack, and rightfully so. The school system is not perfect, especially here in America. But, sometimes it's not our fault. Sometimes it truly is that what we're given to work with. So that kid, I couldn't save him. There was nothing I can do to save him until he escapes that living condition, which he may never, because I don't know if he can ever get that emotional maturity. Until he escapes that situation, there's nothing that me or any other teacher can do for him other than just provide him 8 hours of safety away from his house a day, you know? The kid from this last year, I mean, I did the best I could with him, you know, the one who lived with his grandparents, like, and he turned it around. I mean, he became a much nicer kid, got in a lot less trouble, but at the end of the day, like, you know, who's to say that once he leaves my class and he has a different teacher that, you know, he goes back to those old ways? I mean, I don't know. So it's tough, you know, it's tough. We do the best we can with the kids that we have, and a lot of times it's not enough because you cannot effectively, in the 8 hours or 7 hours that you're given, you cannot effectively combat what happens at home. So the home life is the most important part. You know, everything begins and ends at home. So take care of your kids, raise them right, you know, do your best. And in the words of Michael Jackson, if you can't feed your baby, then don't have a baby. And don't think maybe if you can't feed your baby. All right, that's it for me. 2 thumbs up all the way around. Really enjoyed this song. Sorry for taking 25 minutes of your day, but you know, I just had to get all that shit off my chest, I guess. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed the song. If you did enjoy the song as much as I did, definitely go support the artist. Go listen to their music wherever you can. One place you can definitely find plenty of Smith's music at this point is in my Spotify playlist. It's in the description below. It has every single song I've heard so far on my channel. If you want to support me, all the normal stuff you do on YouTube, you know, like and subscribe and comment. All right, that's it for me. Hope you guys are staying safe and healthy. Hope to see you in the next video. Bye for now.